Thanks so much for joining us for the 2020 BCI Virtual Annual Meeting. I'm Chase Abner, lead church planting catalyst in Iowa for NAM and BCI. And in this session, we are going to be seeing what's new and what's next for church planting. I always say that church planting in Iowa is necessary, possible, and exciting, and we definitely see that at play this year. Just to give you an idea, here's some of the churches that have been planted in the last few years here in Iowa. Living Stone Church in Corydon, Sacred Mission Church in Collins, Restoration Church in Adel, First Family Church in Albia. And if we look at the last 5 years, there's even more new churches in Iowa. Christ Point Baptist Church in Shenandoah, Frontier Church in Des Moines, Cottage Grove Church in Des Moines, Three Rivers Community Church in Carlisle, Life Change Church in Des Moines, City Point Church in Urbandale, Iglesia Bautista Hispania in Waterloo, Iglesia Bautista de Restauración Familiar in Coralville, and Rock Island Bible Church in Rock Island, Illinois. And we're excited for 3 new church starts this year in spite of the pandemic. Multiply Church in West Des Moines, Journey Church in Waterloo, and Berean Bible Church in Manchester. And coming in 2021, we're praying to see Hope City Church launched in Clinton and Cornerstone Church in Marshalltown. The North American Mission Board is our national organization dedicated to mission in North America. And one of the primary functions of NAM is church planting across the nation. Tim Lubina sat down with NAM President Kevin Ezell to evaluate the year and look at what's next for NAM.
Our next guest is Kevin Ezell, and Kevin is the president of the North American Mission Board. Kevin, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for the opportunity. Always good to talk with you.
Yeah, I'm assuming that you're in your home in the Atlanta area?
I'm in my office in the Atlanta area, yeah.
Very good. Well, let's get started. We're curious about how things have gone with the North American Mission Board in 2020. And so how have you navigated all that's happened this year?
Yeah, but it's just like everybody else. It's like every day you have to call a different audible. So it's like everyone else. You have to expect the unexpected and just roll with it. But we're very grateful. You know, in the midst of what has been an incredible challenge, it stretched people in ways they otherwise would never have been stretched. And so that part we're celebrating.
Yeah, talk about that. How have they been stretched?
Yeah, well, one instance, I can give you several, but one was there was an 80-year-old bivocational pastor, and his church runs about 25 to 30. Well, the pandemic hit, and they just went completely dark, no service, no anything. His granddaughter said, well, Papa, you should do Facebook Live. He said, what's that? And so she showed him what Facebook Live was. So he sent an email out to all of his people and said, we'll do Facebook Live on Sunday. They had over 80 show up on Facebook Live. Huh. And he's like, where's this been all my life? So, I mean, that's just a small illustration of what it takes. Sometimes, we are forced to make decisions and forced to be a little bit more progressive than we typically would be.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious about the Easter offering, the Annie Armstrong Easter offering. This hit just before Easter, and more than half of your budget comes in that month. And I recall talking to you and you saying, hey, I didn't know if this was generous or risky or maybe not so smart. You said, we're going to stop our promotion of the Annie Armstrong Easter offering. Talk about that decision and tell about what happened.
Yeah, it was right in the bullseye. I mean, it could not have hit it more directly. And I know what it's like to be a pastor, and you have all these anxieties going through, especially in something like this, no one expected. And the last thing they need is another responsibility or another even guilt of, I need to get my people. They just need to get their people focused on assembling as a body and not have the pressure. I felt like that often an extra offering would bring. So it is 50% of what we operate on. And for us, that's $60 million a year. And that meant we went into shift mode where we downshifted to expecting, maybe a 50% hit, and end up being hit by 20%, which is about $12 million. But we made a commitment to keep all of our missionaries on the field, to continue to fund our planters and continue to fund evangelism, and to plug holes where we need to plug holes. And so we were able to do that and basically put everything dead in the water for a few months. And there wasn't a lot of activities going on in March, April, and May, if you remember. Yeah. So that really helped make sure to recoup some expenses there.
Now, I'm sure you had to make some decisions and budget cuts, and I know how budget cuts work it's good stewardship unless it's my budget, and then it's no fun. What were some of the values or principles that you used in order to make those hard decisions?
Yeah, and what was ironic, Tim, is like 2 years ago, I went to a staff meeting of my executive leaders and said, I played the little clip off of Apollo 13 movie where it said, "Failure is not an option. We've got to get these guys home." I love that movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I love watching it the second and third and fourth time because I know they get back okay, But that sense of failure is not an option. And I told myself, I said, look, something happened. We lost a third of our revenue. I want you to go back to your office, come back in 2 hours and tell me what you would operate on. Well, that was 2 years ago. And we basically, we somewhat had a game plan on what to cut and what not to cut. We'd had to increase it a bit. But our principle was, one, we did not want to cut any missionaries, make any drastic decisions over what we think will be a one-time, hopefully a one-time hit. And so we didn't want to cut personnel on the field. Any cuts, we wanted to experience those in Alpharetta. And that was just to get through the year. And then now looking and budgeting, we're on course to hope, not cut any missionaries still. And we just have to be very intentional and strategic. And so, for instance, like things like evangelism. In evangelism, we want to provide money for all the states to do evangelism, all the non-South states. But we want to be very strategic. And you guys don't have a problem with that because you, by nature, are very strategic because you're IMB background and so forth. But not everyone has a plan. And we just want everyone to have a strategic plan, and then we'll help fund those dollars to make sure every dollar people give goes directly to an evangelism training or activity, if you would.
Yeah, and speaking on those two issues, we're so grateful for having basically all the church planting funds that we could request and for having all the evangelism funds that we could request. We got our smart guys thinking of projects that would properly steward those resources for 2021 and 22. And we're so grateful for your help in all that. We can do a lot more with your help than we could do just on our own.
Well, you're kind of say that we're all better off together, and it's just fun doing it with partners like yourself. We're a big family though, and there are over 42 state conventions. I just wish they were all more like Iowa.
You may or may not be aware of, I don't think you are because it just happened this morning, our executive board made the final decision to increase our cooperative program giving in 2021 from 50% to 60%. And we're just excited about the partnership. And we've been able to do that, kind of sharpen our pencils. And we've actually added a few staff people in the last year or two. So we have enough money to carry out our mission here in Iowa, but yet still have some left over to support North American Mission Board and IMB and the other entities.
That's incredible. I sure hope you get that word out and you do an article on it or something to make sure people know, because what you're doing, you're at the cutting edge of what I hope to see other conventions follow.
Let's talk about 2021 and beyond. What are some things you're working on for next year and the next few years?
Yeah, one of the things we're really excited about is a focus on collegiate ministry, and we've been focused on collegiate church planting. My word, Iowa is the launching pad of that. But we also have many ministers on campuses all over North America, and there are actually almost 80,000 Baptist ministries, if you will, that we want to engage in Send Relief and Send Network and kind of have that whole SALT model really go into all over North America to get the students very intentionally graduating and spending the first 2 years engaging in some way. The second is an emphasis on Hispanic church planting. If you look at the population increases, Hispanics are by far the highest geographic expanding demographic, if you will, in North America. And so we must focus on, more church planting in our Hispanic community. And then ongoing Send Relief efforts where we're adding at least 7 to 8 more Send Relief ministry centers. And so the pastors would understand it's about helping your people see how to do things where they are model and multiply. We have national ministry centers, but it's everything we do is modeled so they can multiply where they are. When I was a pastor, I took my people to Guatemala, and we went inner city Guatemala and an area called the Dump in Guatemala. And some of my guys got such a heart for missions, they went back to Louisville, Kentucky, where I pastored, and started a homeless ministry. And they for so many years had looked over that and not even saw that as an opportunity. But it took a trip to Guatemala to get them to see a need right beneath their noses. That's all we're trying to do in Send Relief, is help people see the need somewhere else so that they can more clearly see the need where they are.
Oh, that's wonderful. Let's go back to the collegiate ministry for a minute. And, the affiliated churches with Baptist Convention of Iowa are connected with thousands of students in Iowa and around the Midwest. And so imagine talking to a graduating senior who has an interest in ministry and giving his life for the kingdom. What advice would you have for a college student at that age?
Yeah, well, senior, we like to get them as a freshman so we can kind of condition them with summer missions and that. But what I would tell a senior is, look, be strategic. At least be open to the first 2 years of being strategic. If you're going to be an engineer, be an engineer. But when you go to Pittsburgh or Philadelphia or LA or San Diego or wherever it may be, let us help you connect and be very missional. Sometimes they think they can only be missional if they're a church planner in some way, but there's so many other ways to do that, to come alongside a church planner. And, we can help match you up. We would like to be eHarmony Go Church Planning for a senior, to let us know where you're headed, and we can connect you and give you 3 or 4 options, and you pick. But we just want you to be very strategic as you launch. It's the most critical, when you leave college and you launch into life, it's an incredible opportunity now that you rarely have this much flexibility in your life ever. And we want you to make the very most of it.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, we in Iowa, we want to be good partners with the North American Mission Board and the other partners and entities. Do you have any advice or suggestions to some of our pastors in how to stay connected and supporting the North American Mission Board?
Well, you do. Obviously, you guys are incredible partners. We're grateful for their faithfulness. If they just continue to pray, and we want to come alongside churches to help, and pastors to help their churches take that next missional step. And I just want pastors to know, and you do this, you remind them continually. It's all about taking the next step. If they're on a 1 to 5 scale, if they have a members on a 1, we'd love to see them move to a 2. And if they're on a 2 scale, move to a 3. And you can't expect overnight incredible exponential growth, but one step at a time, you can move them to pray for a planner. Then they may want to participate and go see a planner and worship in a service. And then the next time they may want to serve in some way, and just gradually work them there. And so the best way that they could possibly support us is through prayer, and then to know we want to be a partner to help them help their people take that next step.
All right, very good. I have one more question before we wrap up, and let's go back to state convention partnerships. How do you see that evolving in the next 5 years or so? What are some things we need to do a little bit more of, and what are some things that you think will pass by?
No, well, I think we're going to know a lot in 5 years. The fact when people ask me, "What about state conventions?" and the key next question is, which one? Some are going to be very strategic. Some are not going to be very strategic, and some will go away. And they basically will all decide that on their own. But it's impossible to. It's just all going to depend on the specific convention and their leadership. And so they're typically as strong as their leader. And we just need healthy. You have to remember, we're here to reach North America. We're here to plant churches and to reach North America. And sometimes we get so focused on the structure that we forget the strategy. And you got to have structure sometimes to meet the strategy, but you've done a great job of keeping your convention focused on a proper balance. And so we just need more conventions to learn from that example. And so, who knows? I think there will be state conventions. There will be all sorts of different types of it, structures, but some will be healthier, some will be the same, and some will not be there.
All right, very good. Well, as we wrap up, and you think you're going to be speaking with several of our key leaders and pastors and elders and deacons and members of Baptist Convention of Iowa churches, is there anything else that you would like to say to them while you have a few minutes in front of them?
Man, thank you so much. Yeah, first of all, the IMB is way overrated. Way overrated. I focus on the North American. If we lose the homeland, I'm just kidding. Yeah. I'm so thankful to be able to partner with guys like Paul Chitwood and IMB, and we have such a great relationship. I just want you to know that you have people that God's placed leading entities as well as your state convention that want to work together. I firmly believe we are stronger together. We're a big family. It's a big family with 17 million people a part of it. And we're going to have some crazy uncles occasionally. But I would just encourage you to round up, don't round down. And to know that, man, God is doing some significant things in North America and around the world because we're better and stronger together.
I've quoted that before, that don't round up, don't round down. Not everybody understands what you're referring to. Explain that a little bit more.
Yeah, I think sometimes, when you don't know somebody or don't know a whole situation, you just automatically just assume the worst. And where I would say round up is, look, assume the best and then find out the rest. I've tried to teach my kids, you don't know the whole story, and I also remind myself is you don't know what you don't know, and it's just easier to veer south or veer north. And I just say, always give someone the benefit of the doubt. It's like we're guilty until proven innocent in today's society, where it's, hey, let's just give them the benefit of the doubt. They're innocent until proven that they're a scoundrel. And so, I just know that I know Paul at the IMB, and my mom can vouch for me. I know the seminary presidents. Those are guys they're guys who want to please the Lord. They have quiet times. And they're seeking God. Perfect, none of us are, but are they people who are godly and doing the very best they can? They are.
Yep.
And we could not be more thankful to partner with Iowa Baptist.
Yeah, very good. I noticed you deliberately left off Russell Moore. Was there a reason for that?
No, I always include him with the smart guys, in the seminary. So, obviously, I love Russ. He was actually preached one of the services at Highview where I pastored for years, and we had multiple campuses, and I would preach 3 services and then leave and go do another campus, and he would stay and do the 4th service at Highview. So no, I love Russ.
So you got started just before I did, and I still remember as I was getting started with the Baptist Convention of Iowa, you calling and just to encourage me and invite warm partnership between the Baptist Convention of Iowa and the North American Mission Board. And we've had that. And I'm really grateful for that. You talked about relationship. I'm glad we have a good relationship. And I'm grateful for your strategic leadership. And you know what strategy is, right? It's easy to know what to do. It's hard to know what to stop doing and all the challenge of that. And you've done that so well. And we, on behalf of the Baptist Convention of Iowa, want to thank you for your service at NAM and for being part of our annual meeting this year.
Well, thank you, Tim. Grateful for Iowa Baptist. I'm very grateful for you, your friendship, and may you never retire.
All right. Very good.
This year, we have the pleasure of seeing a recently planted church already taking steps to plant another church here in Iowa. And this just highlights the fact that it's not a matter of size, but intention and culture that determines church planting fruitfulness. Check out this video where you're going to hear Donovan Santamaria of Redeemer Church, Cole Dykey of Frontier Church, and Nick Powell of upcoming Hope City Church talk about how generations of church planting creates a culture of multiplication.
So, talking about church planting, and it's interesting, we're sitting here, you came out of Redeemer, but And I was talking with someone this morning out of the Cedar Falls campus, which is our smallest campus, and then took him with you, and that was good. And you've sent them to Clinton, so that's good. Excited for that. So we're gonna get into that a little bit, but a little more about like Redeemer and how we got involved with church planting. I mean, in one sense, I always tell people every church is a church plant, right? Like that's just inevitable. At some point, it had to start. But yeah, when I came to Iowa, the church, which is now Redeemer, was called Imago Christi, and it was planted out of the Conservative Baptist Association about a year before I had come. In one sense, I'd say replanted that church. And I mean, it's a different denomination, a different name, it's a different location, different vision, different ecclesiology. Like it, in essence, was a church plant. So that was really different. So I felt the need to connect. And that's when I reached out to Acts 29 and saw assessment and did that. And we joined the Acts 29 network for a while. So that was our first foray into church planting proper, was identifying other leaders, other planters in the region, and just come alongside them and trying to help them. And the next kind of big stage was the going multi-site and merging in Cedar Falls. And and then you guys came out of the woodwork. You know what I mean? And that's really just God's provision, should say, because I would say, maybe I'll ask you guys, like, why, when Redeemer merged in Cedar Falls, and you guys had been there for several years at that point, involved in different churches, like what drew you in? Why did you come around?
Yeah, it's church planting. I mean, like I was saved in college. Powell, you were saved in college. And so I fell in love with the concept of church planting before I even knew that church planting was a thing. Like I was involved in several different ministry startups in college, and I just loved being at the ground level of new endeavors. And so when we walked into Redeemer, I just fell in love with it from pretty much day one. I know, Powell, you had kind of the same experience, but walking into a church plant that got church planting, like that, for me, that was really like the ticket, man. Like we walked into a church that I think was probably already praying about a church planter. And that set the tone for my experience and my involvement at Redeemer.
Yeah. I remember I just wanted to be around a church that had life. I mean, that was like my whole grid for church. I was, we were 20 years old. 19, 20 years old, I was like, okay, I just want to be somewhere that had creativity, vibrancy, life.
Sure.
And it wasn't until later that I started to understand what it was and discern, like, okay, I like the theology, the emphasis on, making disciples, growing, that kind of thing. Because church planting forces, I mean, it's implied in church planting that you're doing new things and you're innovating.
Yeah, at that point, you didn't view yourself as a preacher, as a lead pastor.
No, I didn't think I was going to be a lead pastor or anything like that. So I was just wanting to be around that culture. That was it.
I remember meeting you, our first coffee together, and you expressed to me that you had this desire, to be a church planter.
It was like within the first 5 minutes.
Yeah. And I had so here's the thing, I obviously believe in long-term assessment, and we did do that with you, but there was a sense of like, there were some things right off the bat that I thought this could be. Like just the way you carried yourself, you obviously had a strong communication gift. And I was like, do you remember what I said to you?
Yeah. You said, I'll never forget. You said, you're probably either a church planter or a wolf.
Yeah. Oh, but do you know why? Do you remember why?
Yeah, because I think I came in with a clarity of calling and passion and vision. Right?
Well, there's that, but you were, if I recall correctly, not submitted to a local church.
That's true.
So you were just kind of like this self-aggrandized, like I'm going to plant churches, but you don't submit to churches.
Right.
And so what we did was we invited, we said, hey, maybe, but let's find out. So let's invite you in and encourage you and quickly empower you. We want to give you an opportunity to grow and test that. And you literally went through everything. I mean, you came and became a member.
That's the way you phrased it. You said, if you want to plant a church, maybe you should become a member of one first.
Dang! You were like, whoa, like what? We forgot about that part. Yeah, so over time, the conversation, I knew you had this dream of church planting, and we'd talk about it every once in a while, but eventually it just became clear that it was like, okay, this is probably getting close. How long were you at Redeemer before you guys like left? What was like entry to exit?
2.5, 3
years?
Yeah.
That's pretty fast. Yeah.
Maybe 3.5 then.
People ask me all the time, like, how do you determine when to church plant? You know, like, when are you going to plant another church? Like, how would you guys answer that question?
I don't know. It seems to me dependent on the development stage of the planter.
Yeah.
Right? So, like for me, I had no grid for being a vocational pastor, when I was 20 years old. And I was in a band at the time, touring around, and I was not submitted to a local church. And I had no real view of what it meant to belong to a local church and have my ministry submitted within that context. And so for me, coming out of a touring band and then coming into Redeemer was a huge part of my development, understanding.
So formative for you, dude.
Yeah, like how does the local church interface with my individual development as a Christian? And so it was through that I started to understand the importance of like just the bare essentials of Jesus following, which is, the centrality of the gospel, the centrality of making disciples that make disciples. And I saw that an inevitable end to that is churches that plant churches. Like it's just part of the outflow of being.
Why? Why is that
Christian.
inevitable?
Because healthy things multiply and disciples make disciples. And so, and so like the lie that I think most churches drift towards, including myself, is that in order to stay healthy, you have to consolidate resources. You have to shovel everything in towards yourself. Whereas, Jesus said it's better to give than to receive. And so I saw like young churches, scrappy churches, healthy churches weren't necessarily the biggest organizations on the planet, but they had life. There was a vibrancy at Redeemer, despite its numbers.
Yeah.
And then Frontier, same thing. Like being a part of Frontier in Des Moines, I was like, man, there's a vibrancy here. And I think that one of the central pieces to that is the multiplying emphasis, like the church planting, making disciples. It's so congruous with the New Testament. Like when you read the story of the New Testament, it's like, man, this thing is a scrappy movement of outward focus. And it really was done by the riffraff and the scrappy people of that day.
Riffraff.
It wasn't the best and the
great,
brightest. Yeah. It wasn't the biggest organizations and the sexiest places that did all these great
Certainly
things.
not the biggest. And that's the one thing that I think is interesting is, back how do you determine when to plant? It's literally when you have a planter.
Yeah.
And we have planters, so you plant. What am I going to do? I'm going to crush your dreams, or the way I put it is you're going to go anyway, so I can either help you go gladly, right? Or be mad about it. Like you're going to go. And so Redeemer's a multi-site church of Cedar Rapids and Cedar Falls. Cedar Falls is the smaller campus by a third, or it's a third of the size of Cedar Rapids, and yet that's where our planters have come out of. So it's my point there would be there's zero correlation between size and sending, right?
Yeah.
Like we had those guys,
Right.
and as we speak right now, we have a planter couple leaving, Michael and Ailey Van Wordhuizen, on their way to Denver. And I don't want them to literally
right now they're driving outside of the city limits.
That's true.
So this is interesting.
Today's the day.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is an interesting moment. We just had a send off for them last night. And I'm sitting here with you guys today. And yeah, it's really, really interesting. But on the Cedar Falls campus, we're sending off another great couple of leaders. And, we've yet to break 100 there, So are we a failure? I mean, that's the question. I have to remind myself and ask some of my elders and other staff guys, like when they say, oh man, like struggling to break that barrier. Like, is Cedar Falls campus healthy?
Mm-hmm.
It's not because it's small. Like, well, I certainly hope it grows, but I think it's super healthy in that way. I mean, this is the legacy really of that campus.
It's a bulldog, man. It's small but muscular, and it's got a bite. And it's got a bunch of bulldog pups now, man.
Bulldog pups.
Feisty,
Classic.
scrappy.
Uh-huh.
So we heard a lot about Redeemer, like Frontier going to Des Moines, and you going out there and planting, but then how long have you? It's been 4 years now.
Yeah,
4 years.
Yeah,
and you guys have already sent pals. So what did that look like for you guys to? I mean, you were kind of discovering that calling yourself, and maybe start with that. Then, like you're now at Frontier, and what's that transition look like from I'm a worship leader or a musician to I think I'm called to plant a church?
Yeah,
such a sweet transition.
Well, yeah, it was a journey of discovery for me, and I felt like, man, the essential core of what it means to be a pastor and a disciple maker is something that I could live into, and certainly hope I'm right.
Yeah, well, I certainly.
Yeah, dude.
I guess I understand what you're saying, but I think that one of the key issues is just risk tolerance.
Uh-huh.
Because the reality is, you're not just offered a job,
Right.
with benefits and all that and a guaranteed start. And so you certainly have that. Obviously, you've done it, and you've pulled the trigger in that way before in other ways. You know, like your forays into music and things like that. You certainly haven't built a life where you're like, well, I just need to find the safest job in the cubicle
Right.
and make sure I get my bills paid. There's a risk tolerance there.
Right.
So it was a little different when you came in, you know, right off the bat. Hey, I want to be a church planter. And we're dealing with that.
Yeah.
But this is different. You know, Powell, you've known him for years. He hasn't expressed that before. Now it's starting to. What's that look like for you as a local church and leader to identify, assess, encourage, challenge? Nick.
Yeah, well, so what's really beautiful is that we've been following Jesus together ever since like we got saved in college. But the beauty and the benefit of having a process and a development thing is that you see a guy, even who you've known for a long time, you see them all the way from just benching the bar all the way to like maxing out. And that's kind of Paul's thing to Timothy, like train yourselves for godliness.
Mm-hmm.
The word train there is the same word that we get our English equivalent of gymnasium from.
Mm-hmm.
So he's kind of got like that sweaty gym in his head. In a lot of ways, I think we got to train our church planters. And so,
Right.
like you said, we load them up, we load them up, we load them up. Everybody looks like a good leader when they're benching the bar.
Mm-hmm.
But as you put more weight on it, and as you put more plates on it, and as you see a guy like you bench more and more weight, it just became evident that you flourish the more weight that we put on your bar. Like you flourish more. And so, like I even think about the first couple times that you preached a sermon. Like some dudes get up there, and it's like they put on their grandpa's blazer. It's like 3 sizes too big for them, and it doesn't fit. And it's like, oh, that's cute. Like Nick is trying to be a preacher. That's not our experience at all. It was, oh, Nick is a preacher.
Huh.
God has gifted him with this. And so from day one, our church knew that one of our 3 goals is we want to be a church planting church. That's what we do. The 4th sermon I ever preached after we planted Frontier Church was about how we're going to tithe 10% of our church to church planting. And so
Why'd you wait until the 4th sermon?
we had to do gospel community mission first. No, but our church was church planting fluent, church planting articulate by the time that God called you and pulled you into that. And so nobody was like, why are we planting churches when we're only a couple years old?
Right.
Everybody was like, that's what we do.
Right.
That's what we do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that relates to, you know, another issue of like, how do you prepare your church for that thing? Like, by the time you came around, again, it wasn't a surprise that we were going to plant a church because we had already partnered in other ways, right? It's kind of like start small, like, well, champion it, communicate about it. One of the issues, and I touched on this earlier, is that I said there's not a direct correlation between size and sending. Like, so it depends on how you envision church planting.
Right.
You could think like, man, you really got to be a big church to pull this off. You know, you're going to send 50 to 100 people. You're going to, you know, launch this big public service. You're going to buy tons of equipment. You know, you're going to have a full staff or even maybe just one staff. And like in that sense, yeah, I guess you would need a big organization to pull that off. But that's not the reality of how most churches are planted. Most churches, I mean, you went to Des Moines with how many people? 8. And you went to Clinton with none? Your family?
My family, there's another one moved from Des Moines.
And so if you view it more that way, which is the majority of what church planting looks like, I mean, realistically, historically, even currently, is a small team kind of heading out. We got some support and some funding. And I think once you see that and it's normal, then you can start to see how you don't have to be the big church to do that, right? Like you I don't know what was your attendance at by the time you guys sent them out?
150.
Yeah. So I'm sure some people would love to be that size, right? But that's not a huge church,
No.
right?
No.
And likewise, the Cedar Falls campus, you know, it hasn't broken 100. And so this relates to maybe the final thought that I have or point of discussion, which is you're calling out things in people, not sitting around waiting. And one of the things that the way we've talked about that at Redeemers, I want to be able to dream with you, but not make promises.
Right. That's what Cole did with me. Like community group leadership, preaching lab, sitting at the elder table. Like I wasn't just like given this vision and then nothing was backfilled. I was walking with you every step of the way. And so it was an ongoing dialogue in the context of doing the work of the ministry. And so, yeah.
Yeah, coaching,
Just wanna
mentoring.
do
Any quick thoughts on that?
I think that a lot of guys, when they don't have responsibility and when they're not bench pressing a lot of weight, they can create in their imaginations this future version of themselves as a church planter. And that version is always awesome. Like who they dream about themselves being is always awesome. But who they are when the weight of ministry actually gets stacked on them, that's who you want to know. So I think you gotta draw that out of them through increased responsibility and repetition and chances.
Yeah. The last thing I'll say about that is I think that what was most helpful for me was having a safe context to fail. I think that was everything for me, like failing forward in preaching, in spiritual leadership, you know, like at the elder table, pastoral care, like all these things. I was in a safe environment with other men sharing the responsibility with me. So, you know, like let's say I come up into the pulpit and I preach a terrible sermon, and I'm just down on myself or whatever. I know, well, first and foremost, I know the gospel. So I know my identity is not rooted in my performance, but I also know that Cole's going to step up into the pulpit the rest of the month. You know what I mean? And so everybody in this church is going to go, "Ooh, well, that was rough."
And he's going to put you back up there.
Yeah. And so they won't have to, nobody's thinking in that moment, is this our guy every single week? You know, they know that I'm being developed, I'm growing in this thing, and I'm getting reps. And so I fail in a context where I'm surrounded by support, encouragement, love. And I think that's important. I think I've seen people who go out too early and fail, and they don't have that context. It's just they implode. So I think that's the burden of the leader, is to create a safe environment for people to fail. And if they don't, then I don't think we should expect results to go positive.
Which is why you didn't plant out a Redeemer, but you planted out a Frontier.
Right.
Yes. You were
I wasn't
unsafe.
Ready. No.
I'm just kidding.
We had a safe playground before.
Yeah.
This is good.
But yeah, I think I mean, you know this, like one of my early church planting assessments, one of their concerns was that I hadn't experienced enough ministry failure. And so I carried that with me, I think, in a really healthy way, where it was, I feel like now I'm concerned if a guy isn't failing in some capacity in ministry. And we had those conversations even with preaching stuff, where it's like, dude, I would love to see you try this methodology and to try to change that and to take a risk and to even expect failure.
Right.
And when it happens, like that's great. Dust yourself up, get up and jump back on the horse and let's do it again.
That was huge for me.
Because you don't want a guy you don't want your church planting resident to just lock in to trying to appear like he's got it figured out. You want him learning how to think on his feet and how to wonder how he can do this thing better, and how he can wonder how the Holy Spirit can help him preach better over here, and how he can wonder if I did it this way, would that make it 1% better? That I think that's what you want out of a church planter. Those are church planting muscles.
Right. Yeah.
That's good. So I think there's a whole lot more we could talk about, but it's probably good for now. And I miss sitting with you guys for sure.
Yeah.
This
Likewise.
is like,
It's fun.
yeah. So look forward to see what God does in Clinton, Des Moines, Iowa. Yep.
Israel Becerra is a new addition to our Church Planting Catalyst team, and one of the ways he's going to be helpful to us in the coming years is understanding church planting in Hispanic context, a major opportunity for gospel expansion in Iowa.
Here in Iowa, we are blessed because we have a lot of opportunities. Among the Hispanic community, Iowa is one of the states that it's growing with more Hispanic people coming here because there is a lot of places where they work. We are blessed as Christians to have them here because we can share the gospel not only with the people that we have already in our communities, but also with these immigrants coming. So, and then some of the cities that there is potential to reach them out, it's Des Moines, it's Sioux City, Pottsville, and Perry. And I think they are ready. So, and I think we have the opportunity as BCI churches to share Jesus' love to them if we invite them, if we intentionally connect with them, if we invite them for some, I don't know, I'm thinking about like some block parties or or like a meal, or I don't know, like picnics. So you can invite them, even if you don't speak Spanish. It's a good opportunity that you find someone that translate your invitation, your flyers, and you invite them to these activities. And also, it's important to understand that the children, the youth, they speak English now. So we have a good opportunity because they speak English also. So you can invite them to your activities, to your church. Make them to feel that they are welcome to your community and also welcome to your church. Some challenges that we face here in Iowa, I'm thinking in two main things. The first thing is the lack of leaders, the lack of trained leaders. So there is not too many Hispanic church planters, Hispanic pastors that they are trained. So if you pray for us to have more leaders about to come and be trained, these leaders, and come and start church planting. But also the church planters that we have trained, the second challenge that we have is that we need some resources. And when I talk about resources, I'm thinking in two things. I'm thinking financially to support these church planters, these pastors, but also I'm thinking in a process of migration before the government. So one of the biggest need that we have, or challenges, is to find churches that they are sponsors for these church planters through a migration process or through the legal paperwork to have them here in Iowa. And I think this is most of the challenges that we have. On the other hand, it's worth to do ministry here in Iowa, even facing these challenges. So let me share with you this story. Pablo, he is now in college, but let me go back a little bit. Pablo, he started coming in our children program some years ago. So, and also we were connected with him through our children ministry here, and now he's in college. And guess what? Like some weeks ago, we were eating together, and he said, "Hey, Pastor, you know that I'm studying to be a teacher, elementary teacher. But you know what? I want to combine to be a teacher, and also want to combine that to be a leader in the church, maybe to be a youth pastor. So then it's worth, when you overcome the challenges that you are facing to plant a Hispanic church, is worth, because you have more Pablos that they grew up in the church. You reach them with the gospel. And let me say one more thing about Pablo. Pablo started coming to church even when they're, his parents, they don't come to church. But now he's a Christian. You know what? Now his parents and his other two brothers and grandma and aunts, they start coming to our church. So I mean, it's worth to plant churches in Iowa to see how Jesus, how the gospel is changing lives, and not only single person. It's reaching out families, the whole families, and that's worth to see how Jesus, how the Holy Spirit, how God's word, it's changing people, it's saving people. And sometimes we think that, oh, you know what, we have to have a group of 20 people. I mean, pray and ask God, like, you can meet at least one person, because in our culture, when you have a friend, this one person is going to connect you with mom, dad, aunts, grandma, uncles, friends, and when you start like connecting with what person, if you ask God to give you the chance to connect with one person, so this person is going to connect you with another 100 people, believe me, because that is our culture. And also, good place to start is like you can connect with us, you can connect with BCI, you can connect with us. So we are more than welcome to help you. And also the way that you can support a church planting probably is you don't have the pastor, you don't have the planter, but also the way that you can support this is like you can become a sending church for this Hispanic church planters in your community. I'm grateful to partnership with BCI because it's allowing us to keep doing ministry. In what ways? When you start a new church, you have to do a lot of connections in the community, a lot of bands, And BCI has been helping us financially to make these events happen. Also, my wife and I, my family, we've been blessed through BCI when they have some conferences, when they have some trainings, and they invite us to be part of this, because we can have fellowship with other pastors, other churches. Also, we've been blessed because we're making new friends, we're making new connections. I can connect with other churches and see what God is doing in other churches, how God is working in different communities, reaching out, and that really encouraged me to keep sharing the gospel and keep planting churches around Iowa. BCI has been a bless for me, for my family, and for my community.
We believe that churches plant churches. And we saw that at play in the launch of First Family Church of Albia, who just celebrated their first anniversary. In this video, Pastor Jason Laxton tells the story of how a number of churches played a part in helping them launch. Through the story, it's clear that there are many ways, big and small, that churches of every size can be involved in church planting.
When we first got here, the church was set up in a very traditional style, had the pews that kind of ran this way, and everything was facing narrow and long ways this way. This was all choir loft. We were looking forward to having more people, so we opened up the space a lot. We turned it sideways, and then we just turned everything this way. It's a real intimate setting. I love preaching here. It just feels very close with each person here, and we just really like the way that it was done. It was Crossway Church in Sulphur, Oklahoma, that really talked to us about doing it this way, and they've just been a huge support for us in this whole process. A little over 2 years ago now, we were asked to pray about coming to Albia to plant a church, that they had a building that they were closing down and or had closed down, and there wasn't much of the congregation left there, just about 4 people before they actually closed the doors. And so we prayed about coming here. We prayed about, we visited several times, and we kind of fell in love with the community. We decided to make the move to come here, really not knowing a whole lot, looking back, about what resources we had and what we didn't have. And so we really just sort of trusted God that He would provide everything. And I'll be honest with you, throughout the process, there were many times when I said to myself and those who were close to us, I just don't know how this is going to happen. And every step of the way, God provided. We just had so many people partner with us in the process, so many great churches. From the very beginning, First Family Church at Ankeny, who is very near and dear to our hearts. We were part of that church plant many years ago. I think it was 2004. They helped get us in the house, which needed quite a bit of work when we first came here. And not only supported us financially, but sent help and a lot of prayers and a lot of support. And so we're just so grateful for them. Grace West Church that we attended in West Des Moines for years when we lived in Des Moines years ago. Not only sent funds, but also people to come down and help. And they were just a huge blessing to us. One of our sister churches here in Cornerstone Church in Sheraton, they continue, just like the rest of them, to be a huge blessing. They're just about 30 miles down the road, and they were very instrumental in helping us get in and sending help. And so we just feel really, really blessed by them, and so thankful and grateful for them. There's been many churches. We had a group from Spartanburg, South Carolina, help canvass the town, help us reach out during restoration days in Albia. So many others. Of course, the BCI was just a huge help in not only getting us in, directing us, support, help. North American Mission Board has backed us just in an immense and tremendous way. I don't know that any of this really would have been possible without any one of them. So the idea of churches helping churches is just been such a blessing for us, and so we're so thankful for each and every one of them. When we first got here, the church had pews, and we took those out, not really realizing how expensive chairs were. And we always wanted to have chairs like these, but we didn't really have any idea what they cost. And so there was a church, Grand Avenue Baptist Church in Ames, that was willing to donate and give these chairs to us. And I think total in all, there was 250 some of these chairs. And so I was just curious what these chairs cost. And so I got online, I started to do some checking. I think at a minimum, they were about $65 a piece. And so that would have cost us at least $13,000. But they probably have no idea what a blessing that they were to us. And so we thank you guys for that. So a lot of times people think that you have to have this huge church or an immense budget to contribute towards missions and church planting, and that's just not really true. Restoration Church in Adel, Iowa, prior to our launch, about a week or two before we launched, they'd had their first service maybe a week or two prior to that, and they brought down a handful of people, and they were a huge help to us, and they'd really just been meeting a very short time. And so it wasn't that it was a resource thing, but it was a hands and feet thing that was greatly needed. And prior to our launch, coming up and helping us in a great way that was just so valuable to us and needed. And I think so many of us can feel a lot of those needs and we don't even realize it. And so I'm thankful for them and just doing what they can do. And we want to be the same way. We want to be able to help and reach out to churches and do what we can do, whatever that is. And so I think if we all do this, I think we can really see the gospel flourish in Iowa. Our first service here, we were praying that God would have at least 100 people show up and join us for our first service and celebrate with us all that the Lord has done. And we were blown away when that morning the cars just kept flooding in and people just kept coming through the door. And 220 at least was the consensus for head counts that actually showed up to celebrate with us that first Sunday in Albee, Iowa. To have 220 plus people come and celebrate and worship with us was just an amazing thing. And so God blessed us incredibly in that first service and continued to throughout the process. So we're so thankful for all of that and all that He's done. My hope for each one of us is that you can see the value in being involved in church planting. Sometimes we think it has to be in some huge, giant financial way. But I hope you can see that whatever you can do, however God's blessed you, whatever gifts, tools, resources that you have, people, hands, feet, give something that you have at the church that you no longer need that maybe another church would. There's lots of ways that we can all be involved. I just hope that each and every one of us see the value in getting involved. Churches, helping churches reach their community with the gospel. And so I just want to say to all of those who have helped us here at First Family Church in Albia, how grateful we are and how needed each and every church and in every way that they helped, what a blessing it was to us.
We are so encouraged by the work our churches and pastors are doing in church planting here in the Baptist Convention of Iowa. Hopefully you've been inspired and challenged to take your next step as a church to participate in church planting this year. Make sure to get in touch with me to find out how you can take that next step. That concludes our 2020 BCI Virtual Annual Meeting. Thanks for joining us and taking the time to learn about what's next for us as a convention. We are grateful for your participation in gospel ministry through your giving and participation in BCI. Truly, we are better together.